Tapping in.
Are we live?
Speaking about Facebook and how people work at Facebook over this last week and getting into our current news story, if you want to hit any drops on that, is Facebook had a boo-boo. Big mishap, big mishap in Facebook, man. Over the weekend, Facebook lost its power. Facebook crashed for 7 hours and Zuckerberg lost $7 billion. Now, this came directly at the same time that the whistleblower in Facebook shared some rather damning evidence regarding Facebook's algorithms and how predatory they are in perpetuating violence, and not violence, but in perpetuating outrage for the sake of engagement.
Dang, you bodied this graphic. This is I'm scared of Facebook now looking at this. It's real. It's real.
Yo, just to go over it, Facebook has, with Facebook crashing, you have Facebook, you have Instagram, you have WhatsApp, which encapsulates over half of the people on the internet are utilizing these services. Now, if you're not in the US, WhatsApp doesn't mean anything to you, but if you are out of the US, then you understand that WhatsApp is literally how people communicate. That is the number one way that people communicate on their phones.
People do that. People have WhatsApp in the US. I, for one, couldn't talk to my girl. I was devastated. I was distraught. I was a mess. And I'm sure a lot of people were like, similarly, like, yo, people conduct mad business over Facebook. People conduct mad business over WhatsApp. You dig me? Like, it's a serious thing. Like, there are places where people's Facebook pages are their whole front for their business, right? That's how people interact. That's how people know where it's at. And if Facebook is down, it's crazy. I also heard that Facebook, it wasn't just like the servers and the website. It was also that Facebook's internal communications were down. So they couldn't talk about what was going on. And also that they couldn't access certain buildings because of the network was couldn't verify anybody's identity. So you want to talk about Mondays, boy. That's a rough one, dog.
No, that is top 10 worst Mondays that Zuckerberg has for sure. And the conspiracy connection behind it is that a whistleblower in Facebook on that Monday, a few hours before that, came out letting people know about the predatory algorithmic methods that Facebook uses to get people to engage. Now, essentially saying that the Facebook algorithm realized that people were no longer engaging in Facebook and Instagram as much as they used to. People are no longer sharing as much. There's people on these platforms, but they're not engaging as much, up until they realized that by using things that are inflammatory, pushing content that enrages people is a way to be able to get people to engage more. And so in realizing that, they pumped that type of content out, and now it gets people enraged, and that's whatever the case is. And then a few hours after that, Facebook crashes. Now, to demystify the conspiracy behind it, Facebook did not pull the plug on it to be like, fine, y'all think that we're doing this, pull the plug on it. Nah, that is not what happened. The fact is
that would be a very, I'm taking my ball and going home attitude. That would be really funny of Mark Zuckerberg to do. I would almost
y'all hate this?
I almost prefer that version of events. I want to believe that now, actually. I hadn't heard that, but that's funny. But yeah, so it's crazy because I read a little bit about why that push toward negative content. And so basically Facebook in 2018, when their engagement started declining, was like, you know what we're going to do? We want to make Facebook a place where people can connect more. And so basically by connect, they meant comment and repost, right? Reshare everything on Facebook. So they told the algorithm, or they created an algorithm that was specifically supposed to search for content that people, rather than scrolling past or just liking, were more likely to comment upon or repost or share to somebody else. And that turned out to be content that was inflammatory, right? Because if you see a puppy or whatever, you like the puppy, right? You see, somebody helping somebody or a charitable act or something like that, you like that. But if you see somebody saying something maybe that to be false, you comment upon that, hey, that's not true. Or if you see something where somebody where a group is being threatened, oh, let me share that. Or with somebody who I know might be in danger because of that, right? So these inflammatory posts and posts with misleading information became the post that rose to the top of that algorithm, right? And they had the opportunity to say, oh, let's go back, right, to where we were at before, because now we're promoting all of these negative posts. And they were like, well, we kind of need the engagement, and this is engagement. So they kept on rocking with it. And in spite of knowing a few different things that were wrong with it. And that's what the whistleblower, Frances Haugen, she told on them. She tattletaled. You know, she spilled the beans. All right, all the blue beans all over the conference room table. You know, your new workplace environment layout was all full of beans. Your open floor plan had beans spilled and tea everywhere. All your pages, documents, keyboards, tea. She spilled it all, man.
Yeah. But it's not surprising, this information, right? And I don't think anybody particularly found it to be surprising, especially if you followed, for instance, what Cambridge Analytica was doing during the 2016 elections, right? Where they found that the politicians engaged this company, Cambridge Analytica, which was utilizing, let's say they were creating content which was used in order to promote, in order to defamate and essentially shit on other. I'm trying to use that's the word, dude. That's the only word.
Give it to them real.
No, but essentially, so Cambridge Analytica found that they can create content that's not necessarily true, like Hillary Clinton is keeping children under a pizza spot in Brooklyn. And it's like, what? That's crazy. And, you know, and they kept on pumping that type of information out, and realizing that Facebook was able to pick up that this was happening, but did not stop it because of its high engagement rate. And so the question then becomes like, what responsibility do we have to put on these platforms in order to regulate that type of information? Or is that left up to us as users in order to decide whether we want to engage with it or not engage with it?
Yeah. And there's so many different directions that like we can take that conversation, right? Like we certainly have to examine ourselves and why our tendency is to be actionable when something is negative and not necessarily when it's positive. But there's also a certain level of responsibility, right? So as a part of these internal papers that were leaked by Facebook, another thing that came out was that a group of European politicians on both sides of the aisle wrote like a memo saying that they had essentially changed so that Facebook's algorithm promoting more negative content had made them skew their own content negative when they were running for office, and actually resulted in more extreme stances on policy, right? So that's politicians admitting that social media, just not even what people are saying, but what gets clicks and what gets posted determines how they can determine how extreme they are on an issue, right? And that right there is like that to me is like, wow. To even admit that is crazy to me as a politician. Like as a politician, I would maybe say like, this is our posts that we continue to post things that we know to be true and things that we know to be on brand with what we believe, and yet it doesn't get posted. But that's not what they're saying. They're saying, no. Hey man, we gotta admit we're posting some bullshit because of this algorithm, yo. And that's crazy, man. It speaks to like a helplessness that we all feel, right? Politicians and the individual user, we're like helpless not to engage negatively in these things.
Now, with the engagement of negative things, right, there's a term they call spectator value. Now, when you're driving on a highway and there's an accident, and the traffic and the backup that happens of people slowing their cars down to look at the accident is what they call spectator value, right? So it's quantifiable. You can quantify, okay, what is the spectator value based on, what's the spectator value based on this traffic, whatever the case is. Now, the theory behind it is that instinctively as mammals, right? Our instinctive brain is geared in order to look out for trouble. We look out for death. That's why also when people are fighting, your flight or flight senses is going to kick in and your attention is going to be diverted towards it, because that can have a direct impact on your livelihood, right? Same thing then. Now, how does our brain translate into the modern age, right? How does that archaic reaction to our brain transfer into the modern age? You post something online and you're reading comments, and a negative comment and then somebody puts a negative comment, that's going to stand out quicker to you than a positive comment is, for instance. You know what I mean? And so that is, a lot of these things can really be deduced down into what our old brain reacts to. Now, that's the same thing with this Facebook thing. Why is it bad that negative keeps getting pumped out, and why is it that way that we react to it? That is based on that's just based on how our brain's predisposition is, if you will.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you bringing the science into it. That's real, right? And yeah, we have to know that and choose different. And oftentimes corporations of all sorts, right, whether it's fast food companies or social media, capitalize on our lack of self-control in that regard. And so just be conscious, man. Be conscious of your screen time. Like, man, I don't want to leave this conversation. Like, I think you did a really good job of covering like the most important parts of what we need to take away from it here. But I also want to note that, like, they found that Instagram specifically is horrible for teenage girls. That the cycle of preference, that if someone's experiencing anorexia, they literally said that Instagram, our app, more so than TikTok or more so than Snapchat, exacerbates a downward spiral of anorexia and bulimia with teenage girls, right? Because you start to find a preference in your pictures, and that is what it continues to show you, right? And they knew this and didn't change the algorithms. So that's like, bro, if we talking about creating safe spaces for women, like that goes to online too. Like that's trash, B. And like knowing that type of information, how can I like, if I have a kid, how can I let them use Instagram without having a conversation about keeping that in mind, bro? And maybe being even purposeful about following accounts that show you something other than that. I didn't want to leave the conversation without saying that. But you body this joint, bro.
And I'm glad you pointed that out, right? And a big part of what now science is moving towards is being able to classify Facebook and is being able to classify social media as addictive. Having putting it into the addictive dictionary, understanding that there is a dopamine connection into our usage of social media. So the act of scrolling, why is it that us scrolling up on Facebook is the same? We get the same results as us pulling down on a slot machine in Vegas, right? The action of looking at things is actually the same action. Those aren't things that happen by chance, right? Why is it that they have staggered like algorithms that are based on your downtime or your uptime onto the system? This tailored information that's getting pointed towards us is all in order to be able to engage in us. And it really does play on the psyche, onto our psyche and our dopamine psyche. We've covered that. If you do want to check it out, check out the social network documentary on Netflix. It's called it slips my mind right now, but it's absolutely incredible, and it breaks this all down to a science. And really, the people that created these algorithms and the sound, from the sound to the color, from the sound of a light to the color of a light, is all tailored in order to be able to engage our dopamine, and that is pretty interesting.
It is, man, and it's crazy, and it affects all of our day-to-day lives, bro. So to wrap it up, I would say the answer, like what we say to do, is just make companies. If you have all of this internal research that said that this is bad for stuff, you got to change the algorithm, and you got to hold companies accountable who have demonstrated that they've researched the subject, realized that it harms people, and decided not to do anything about it. That's what Facebook said as well, actually, is that if you want us to change how we operate online, legislate it. So we need to meet that. Yeah, legislate it, bro. Big facts.